It's weird what your brain decides to hold on to. Out of all the summers growing up, there's this one afternoon that's burned into my memory. Not because something fun or exciting happened, but because it almost went very, very wrong. I was 15, and it was one of those lazy Washington summers where time moved slow and nobody ever had a real plan. My close friends were all on family trips that weekend, but I still wanted to get outside. So when my old youth group leader's girlfriend, Mia, asked if I wanted to go swim at the lake with her, I said sure. Mia was the kind of person who made you feel included without trying too hard. She was maybe 20, super outdoorsy, and had this chill vibe that made it easy to talk to her even though she was older. We drove out to this lake a few towns over, one of those places where people hiked, grilled hot dogs, and jumped off the rock ledges into the water. There was a spot you had to hike to around the far side of the lake, kind of hidden away, and that's where we went. It wasn't crowded, and by the time we got there, it was just the two of us splashing around near the edge. We were swimming and laughing, not really paying attention to the time, just enjoying the quiet. I remember I was floating on my back, looking up at the trees, when something changed, like my brain suddenly picked up on something my eyes hadn't caught yet. I found myself standing up quickly, without really knowing why, and turning toward the bend in the water. Mia must have noticed the shift in my energy, because she stopped mid-sentence and looked over too. That's when we heard voices. They were faint at first, men talking, joking around. We couldn't see them because the rocks curved around, but the sound was bouncing off the water straight toward us. At first I thought maybe it was just people boating nearby, but then we both froze, because what they were saying, it wasn't normal. One of them, loud and clear, said something disgusting about which one of us he wanted. They even described our hair colors like we were objects. Another guy laughed. Then a third voice told them to be quiet, but it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like someone trying not to get caught. I didn't breathe. Mia's face went pale, and she immediately gave me a look I'll never forget. She put a finger to her lips, motioned for me to stay silent, and pointed to the side of the cliff. Without saying a word, we climbed. Fast. Neither of us even thought about grabbing our towels, or the snacks we brought, or our shoes sitting under the trees. We got to the top right as their little boat turned into the cove we'd just been in, like they were searching. It was small, nothing fancy, but just big enough to carry 3 grown men. They didn't see us, thank God, but Mia didn't take any chances. We ducked into the woods and took off, barefoot, sprinting along the edge of the trail. The trail circled the lake, which meant they could still technically find us if they cut across the water. We kept running anyway, darting behind trees every time we heard movement. I remember how sharp the gravel felt under my feet, and how loud my breathing seemed, even though we were trying to be silent. Eventually, we made it back to the parking area, where her car was the only one left. We jumped in, locked the doors, and got the hell out of there. As we sped away, I looked back one last time and saw the boat skimming along the shoreline in the distance, still circling. The whole ride home, neither of us said much. I just remember Mia's hands shaking while she tried to use her phone once we got service again. She dropped it twice trying to call the police, and I didn't even realize I'd cut my feet until I saw blood on the floor of her car. I never went back to that lake again, even though people still go there all the time. Some spots just don't feel the same once you've seen what they hide. I was the kind of kid who joined track, not because I loved running, but because I needed some sort of after-school activity that didn't involve group projects or awkward conversations in the cafeteria. Freshman year wasn't exactly kind to me. I wasn't popular, and I definitely wasn't athletic. Out of everyone on the team, I came in last during nearly every run, but no one really gave me a hard time about it. Our coach just wanted us to show up, put in some effort, and occasionally warned us about staying alert, especially when we trained at this one park with a pond. The place had a weird local nickname. People called it Stalker Lake. And while the name always sounded like a dumb urban legend, our coach did mention it more than once, usually right before saying something like, "Make sure you run with a partner." Of course, no one ever enforced the buddy rule, and that day, I didn't have anyone running with me. Everyone took off as soon as the coach said go, and within a few minutes, I was already falling behind like usual. We were supposed to do 3 laps around the path that circled the pond. It wasn't that long, just under a mile each loop, but I was still dragging. On my 3rd lap, I was barely jogging, and honestly more focused on trying to breathe through the cramp in my side than anything else. By then, everyone else had already finished and was probably heading back to school. At one point, I slowed down to walk. My side felt like it had a knife in it, and I pressed my hand into it, hunched over and annoyed at myself for always being the straggler. That's when I picked up on the sound of something, or someone, moving behind me. It wasn't subtle either. I heard brush snapping and leaves shifting, like someone was forcing their way out from the wooded area next to the trail. I didn't even think. I just kept moving, faster now, not daring to glance back. It didn't take long before I realized whoever was behind me had stepped onto the path too, because their footsteps started to sync with mine. But every time I sped up, so did they. There was this horrible realization that I wasn't just imagining things. This wasn't someone walking their dog or heading in the same direction. I started to run, not because I was told to, not because it was practice, but because I had to. The footsteps behind me hit the pavement harder, gaining on me. My legs were burning, and my chest felt like it was caving in, but I couldn't stop. I didn't even scream or look over my shoulder. I don't know why. It's like I knew if I did, I'd lose focus. Or worse, he'd know that I saw him. I could hear how close he was, the way his breathing got louder and more strained, the sound of his shoes pounding just behind mine. But I also knew that the trail looped back to the street, and if I could just make it there, I might be able to get away. When I finally saw the break in the trees where the park met the road, I nearly collapsed from relief. I pushed through the last stretch with everything I had, and just as I reached the opening, I heard the man behind me slow down, gasping for breath. I didn't wait to find out what he looked like. I just kept running, past the benches, past the little playground area, and straight out of the park. I didn't stop until I got back to the school, and by then, the place was empty. No one had waited for me. Not the coach, not any of my teammates. I grabbed my stuff from the locker room and walked home, still trying to wrap my head around what just happened. At the time, I was living with my grandma, and I didn't want to scare her. I kept quiet about it, thinking maybe it wouldn't happen again. But looking back now, I wish I had told someone, anyone, because that man had been waiting in those bushes, watching, and I was just a kid. Now I never go running alone without a phone and pepper spray. I don't care if it makes me look paranoid. If someone thinks it's weird that I avoid trails and stick to sidewalks with plenty of people around, that's fine. I know what it feels like to run for real, not for time or distance, but because someone is chasing you and means to do something awful. And honestly, my coach should have known better than to leave a teenage girl alone at a place literally known for being dangerous. The other day, my kid begged me to take him fishing again, and since it was a rare day off for me, I figured why not. He suggested a spot we hadn't gone to in over a year, a sketchy little lake that's more known for sketchy people than actual fish. Last time we were there, some loser drove past and shouted something gross at me, even though I was clearly just trying to hang out with my son. That kind of stuff doesn't shock me in that area. It's the kind of place you expect random hookups and shady deals after dark. Because of that, I had a standing agreement with my dad that I wouldn't stay out there past 4 p.m. unless he was with us. We got there a little after lunch and set up by this quiet little pond across the road from the main lake. It's a smaller, more tucked-away spot we like when we're just trying to relax. Not long after we cast our lines, This older guy strolled over and asked if the pond ever had any fish in it. I told him we hadn't caught anything yet, but we'd had good luck there in the past. He nodded, thanked me, and went back to his side of the road, and I didn't think anything of it. 15 minutes later, a younger guy with a dog shows up and joins the older guy for a chat, and I'm just hoping they stay on their side and let me and my kid have our peaceful afternoon. Unfortunately, the water level in the pond was super low and pretty gross, so I could already tell fishing wasn't going to work out there that day. I told my son to pack up our gear and that we'd try our luck over by the lake instead. While we're putting things in the trunk, the younger guy randomly calls out to us, saying something like, "Hope me and my dog didn't scare you off." I responded politely and told him we were just moving spots. That's when he suddenly switches into full small talk mode, complimenting me for taking my kid fishing and saying stuff like, "You don't see many moms out here doing that." I've heard that kind of thing before, so I just gave him a quick smile and kept packing, thinking the conversation was done. But as I walked around to the driver's side, he decided we were still chatting and asked me how old I thought he was. The question came out of nowhere and honestly caught me off guard, but I gave him a polite guess, said maybe 25. He laughed and told me he was 38, then launched into this whole story about how he lives in the same city as me and got a free apartment after his ex kicked him out. It got weird quickly. The kind of, "Why are you telling me this?" weird. At that point, I was standing next to my car door, hand on the handle, my son already in the back seat, and this dude just would not stop talking. He started ranting about his ex, and then it turned into this full-blown speech about how women these days aren't respectful or obedient enough. He made a snide remark about how it's cute that I can bait a hook, but I'm still a woman. Like that somehow cancels out any capability I have. It was a jarring switch, from casual compliments to full-on sexist garbage, and I could feel the tone changing fast. Looking back, I should have just shut the door and driven off, but I did what so many of us do. I stayed polite even though everything in me was screaming to leave. Instead of getting in the car, I started pushing back a little, trying to signal that I wasn't someone he could talk down to. I don't exactly have a meek appearance, piercings, tattoos, the whole thing, and I hoped that would be enough to send a message. Instead, it just escalated things. He kept going on about how women shouldn't be loud or opinionated, and I finally shot back with something like, "Well, then you definitely wouldn't like me." He tried to soften it by saying it was fine to be loud. Just don't try that with your man, whatever that means. I told him straight up that my man doesn't tell me anything. I do what I want. The conversation spiraled from there until I finally hit him with, "A strong woman acts like that," which shut him up for a second. Right then, from across the road, the older guy we saw earlier shouted, "Yeah, say that again, girl." That gave me just enough of a distraction to jump in the driver's seat and lock the doors. I didn't feel safe yet, though. My car's old and only 2 of the locks still work, the ones on his side, thankfully. But I was panicking. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even try. I sat there, heart racing, while he started walking toward my car again. He could tell something was up and was trying to get my attention like he wanted to help. Just as he got a little closer, my car finally started, and I slammed it into drive and got the hell out of there. Once we were well away from that place, I finally let myself freak out. I talked to my son for a long time about what happened and how to trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. To the older guy who had my back without even knowing me, thank you. You have no idea how much that little moment helped. As for the creep, whether or not he was planning to do anything worse, I'll never know. But I really don't want to find out. And as far as that lake goes, I'm done. Doesn't matter what time of day it is. I won't be going back there without someone I trust. Let me tell you about something that happened a couple of months back. It was one of those midweek, middle of the night kind of things that started off chill and then got real weird real fast. My buddy Drew and I decided to kill some time at this nearby reservoir that locals always end up at when there's nothing else to do. It was around 1 in the morning, and since he works night shifts and I had the day off, neither of us were in any rush. In a place like Ohio, where options are limited, this is kind of a routine thing. Just us, parked near the water, music playing low, windows cracked. It was peaceful. We were just sitting in the car, talking about random stuff, when I noticed movement in the mirror. At first, I thought it might have been a deer or something, but when I looked again, I saw 2 people, some guy and a woman, standing super close to the back of the car, like almost touching it. I rolled down the window to say something, but before I could get a word out, they turned and casually wandered off toward the edge of the lake. The whole thing gave me a bit of a chill. Not exactly scary, just odd. But people fish here at all hours, so I tried not to overthink it. A few minutes later, we figured we'd stretch our legs, so we got out and headed over to this low stone ledge that separates the grass from the lake. Now here's where it turned from mildly weird to straight up unsettling. Drew sat down on the ledge while I leaned next to him, and we were just picking the conversation back up when a guy came out of the shadows near the water and walked up to us. I instantly recognized him as the same dude who had been near the car earlier, but the woman wasn't anywhere to be seen. He greeted us, almost too enthusiastically, with a, "Hey fellas," and Drew responded politely. The guy then walked right up on us, no sense of personal space whatsoever, just standing there grinning with these jagged teeth that looked like he'd been chewing gravel. For several seconds, he didn't say a thing, and then he repeated the greeting again, which Drew awkwardly responded to. Then the guy's whole vibe flipped like a switch. He looked Drew dead in the eyes and said, "You're not looking so good, man. You might want to get the hell out of here." That comment took us both by surprise, especially since he'd been all friendly 5 seconds earlier. I asked what his problem was, and that's when things got bizarre. He turned to me and said, "You're fine, lean, healthy, dressed in red. You're good." Then turned back to Drew and said, "But him? He's fat, wears all black, lazy. He should be punished." I could feel Drew tense up, but he kept calm, even though he's a huge guy, like just under 7 feet tall. He doesn't take crap from anyone, but this wasn't a normal confrontation. It was clear the guy wasn't right. I stepped between them, trying to diffuse things without escalating. I've been trained as a medic, and I immediately noticed this guy's eyes. His pupils were huge, like he was totally spun out on something. Around here, meth's not uncommon, so I was already thinking worst-case scenarios. I told him he needed to move along and leave us alone, but he started getting even more aggressive, insisting Drew didn't belong there. I held my ground, even raised a fist. Not to swing, just enough to show I wasn't bluffing. Finally, something in him clicked, and he backed off, still shouting about fat, lazy people as he disappeared back toward the road. Drew and I sat there afterward trying to make sense of it, but honestly, there was no logic to be found. Eventually, we decided to call it a night, but as we drove off and rounded the bend leading out of the park, we saw him again, just standing there by a tree, watching. As soon as our headlights hit him, he bolted off into the dark, like he'd been lurking there the whole time. That's when it really hit us. This guy might have been waiting for something worse. We didn't go back for a long time after that. Let me tell you about something that happened to me and my buddy Evan not too long ago. It was about 4 weeks back, and still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. Both of us are pretty outdoorsy, like the kind of people who feel more at home in a tent than in a hotel room. So we planned this quick 2-night backpacking trip deep into the Adirondacks, hoping for some peace, campfires, and maybe a chance to fish a little if the weather held up. We'd picked this tiny lake way off the usual trails. Took us about 5 miles of hiking to even get there, and it was dead quiet. just the kind of spot we love. No people, no noise, just trees and water and sky. That first evening went just how we wanted. Made a fire, cooked a simple meal, kicked back with some whiskey under the stars. Around 10:30, Evan pointed out a faint light moving across the far side of the lake. At first, we figured it was just another camper or maybe a late hiker, but the way the light moved was strange. It kept bobbing along the shoreline, not in a straight line, like the person was circling rather than walking with any purpose. We both started watching it more closely as it continued getting closer. Still, we weren't too worried yet, just kind of puzzled. But after a while, it was clear whoever it was wasn't just passing by. They were heading straight for us. Neither of us liked the idea of some stranger showing up in the middle of the night, so we ducked into the woods nearby, not far from our fire, but hidden enough. Evan had a small .22 rifle he brought more for small game than anything serious, and I had my hatchet on me because it felt better than having nothing. We didn't want a confrontation, but we also weren't about to walk out blind if this person showed up looking for trouble, and trouble is exactly what showed up. The man stepped into the edge of the firelight, mid-40s maybe, thick beard, heavy boots, and, most concerning of all, a damn shotgun slung across his chest. No backpack, no camping gear, just him. He circled our site a couple times, totally calm, like he was checking it out. Then, without a word, he ducked into our tent and started rummaging through our stuff like he was looking for something. After a minute or two, he stepped back out and called out into the darkness, "I know you're out there. Come say hi." Evan and I just crouched completely still under this massive hemlock, probably 50 yards off, barely breathing. Then, the guy suddenly turned and fired his shotgun straight into the woods, nowhere near us exactly, but close enough that bark flew from a tree 10 feet to our left. He swept his flashlight around, muttering to himself, and eventually grabbed Evan's pack and some clothes we'd left hanging to dry. He tossed them straight into the fire, like he was making some kind of statement. Evan had his rifle aimed the whole time, whispering if he should take the shot, but I told him no way unless we were directly in danger. We didn't know if the guy was alone, or if there was someone else watching from behind. After a while, he seemed to lose interest and walked back the way he came, light slowly disappearing around the lake's edge. We didn't waste a second. As soon as we were sure he was far enough, we grabbed everything that wasn't burning and packed it into my bag. I carried most of it, and we took off down the trail, flashlights bouncing and adrenaline pumping, running through pitch-black woods until the trees finally gave way to the trailhead. We got back to the car as the sun was rising, exhausted but wired, and went straight to the nearest ranger station to report what happened. Told the whole story to the police, but haven't heard anything since. It was a late July evening a few summers back, and I remember it because the heat was still clinging to the pavement even after the sun went down. I was walking my dog, a nervous but sweet golden mix named Maple, and we'd fallen into this routine of heading out around 9:30 at night because the daytime heat just overwhelmed her. I live in a really quiet neighborhood, one of those towns where folks leave their porch lights on and say hi whether they know you or not. It's not the kind of place where you expect anything unusual to happen, and honestly, I'd been walking her on the same few routes for years and never had any reason to feel unsafe. There's this small reservoir in town, kind of tucked behind a bunch of old trees. It's not big, but there's a worn-in path that winds through the woods along one side and then curves out into a clearing with benches and a couple of those cheap city park grills. From the start of the path, you can actually see across the lake to the clearing on the other side, even though the path itself is shaded and gets dark quickly after sundown. Maple always tugged toward that trail, probably because it smelled like squirrels or raccoons or whatever wild thing had been by recently. So that night, like usual, I let her lead the way. But when we got right to the edge of the tree line, she stopped short. And I don't mean just hesitated. I mean, she slammed on the brakes like I was about to walk her into a lion's den. Her tail dropped low, and she stared straight into the woods, not sniffing, not moving. I gave the leash a gentle pull and tried to encourage her, but she just kept glancing up at me like she was saying, "Please don't make me go in there." Now, Maple's always been a bit jumpy. Thunder, vacuum cleaners, loud motorcycles, but she's never acted like this just being outside. I figured maybe she heard an animal or some rustling I missed, so I tried to nudge her forward. Eventually, she started inching into the woods with me, real slow and stiff, like she was forcing herself. We'd barely gone more than 10 feet when she froze again, and this time her head jerked sharply to the right. I followed her line of sight across the water and saw someone sitting in the clearing on one of the picnic tables. I squinted, and even from that distance, I could tell the person was wearing all black and had a hood pulled up. Nothing too strange on its own, plenty of people like late-night walks, but something about the stillness of the figure just didn't sit right. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there, perfectly still, back straight, facing away from the water. Maple clearly wanted nothing to do with them. I tried coaxing her again, but the further we got from the street lamp behind us, the more tense she became. A few steps later, she whipped around suddenly and started tugging back toward the street. I was confused until I looked back across the lake. The figure on the bench had turned around and was now directly facing us. Still hooded, but I could make out a face now, pale, unmoving, with this weird, fixed stare like he'd been waiting for us to notice him. He didn't wave or shout or make any gesture, just sat there, staring. I didn't waste time wondering anymore. I turned around and started walking fast the way we came, trying not to look spooked, though Maple was making that impossible by dragging me like a sled dog. We'd made it maybe 2 blocks from the edge of the woods when she suddenly veered hard to the left, yanking me down this shortcut we sometimes took home. It's a quieter road with fewer houses, but she was desperate to get off the main street. I tried calming her down, but then something made me turn back. There he was, standing at the corner we just passed. That same figure, same hood pulled up, same black clothes. This time, he wasn't sitting. He was just watching, hands in his pockets, not moving, not saying anything. And I swear, he was smiling. That's when I stopped trying to act casual. I grabbed Maple's leash tighter and started jogging toward home. When we got to the driveway, I let her go and she sprinted straight to the backyard like she was escaping a fire. After that night, I avoided the lake trail completely unless it was daytime and I wasn't alone. I kept walking Maple at night, but we stuck to the lit streets closer to home. I never figured out who that guy was or how he managed to get around the lake that fast, because unless he cut straight through the woods at a full run, he couldn't have reached the street corner in the time it took us to leave. Whatever the case, I don't think he was just out for a walk.